Hey everybody, Scott Wikle. You're listening to My Kind of Country here on Fish Creek Radio. My guest tonight, I'm so happy to have him on the show. I've been blessed to become friends with him over the years from traveling around to see Merle Haggard in concert. And he's without a doubt one of the greatest keyboard players and songwriters and singers to ever come down the pike. And I'm here to talk to him today about his fabulous career and his music, and just it's great to spend some time with him today. Would you please welcome Doug Colosio to My Kind of Country? Doug, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing just wonderful. Now, everybody that's listening to this show is going, man, that guy that's doing the interview didn't even pronounce his name right. It's Colosio. Well, Merle pronounced that wrong on purpose. Tell me about that story.
I tried to. I think the first time it was an accident, and then he liked it, so he kept doing it. And I think that comes from Bob Wills. Used to have a piano player that was named Kelso, and I think Merle liked the way it sounded, kind of like a circus act or something. So he used that too, So it's a combination, I think, of things.
That's great. Well, in all fairness, I didn't know that for a long time until you corrected me one time. So.
Did you know about the Bob Wills thing?
I didn't know. No,
Yeah.
I just figured Merle had some kind of a reason that he did that, and he probably thought it sounded better. I don't know.
Yeah, he liked embarrassing me. There's no doubt about that.
Well, man, let's go back and talk a little bit about your career before Merle Haggard. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you got in the music business and all that fun stuff.
Let's see. Well, let's see. Mom made me take piano lessons when I was 11 years old, something like that, when I started. And I did. I was one of those most improved players type people. So whatever that means. I guess I learned fast, but I didn't practice as much as I should have, and I got into high school and started playing around with guitars and being in bands and stuff like that. And it was cooler to play guitar, so I ended up playing guitar a lot in high school. And I slowly, worked my way back to keyboards because there was just it seemed like there was a lot more work, as a keyboard player than a guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
And through that whole time, I started playing bass too, and so I just I played whatever I needed to do to get the job done, to make music and then make a living at it. So I guess it kind of progressed that way. And then there was also church. I played in church, quite a bit when I was younger, and sang and did that whole thing. I guess I liked being in front of people. I was a ham, so. That's kind of. I guess that's kind of where it all started. I mean, when I met Merle, I was actually living in Nashville. I moved out there with a band called the Marcy Brothers.
Oh yeah.
Playing bass for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those guys.
They had a couple major record deals. They actually recorded "Achy Breaky Heart" first before Billy Ray Cyrus on Atlantic Records. Believe it or not.
Yep, that's right. I remember that.
Yeah, that was quite a thing.
It was kind of funny. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but when I was working for a music chain at that time. When that song came out, and I saw that song, and it was we had it in our bargain bin, the Marcy Brothers CD, and that song was on there.
So you actually, so you actually noticed it before the whole thing happened.
Yeah,
too, huh?
Yeah, because I knew I recognized.
They had a great version of it, right?
They did a great version of it, and I knew I recognized it, and I couldn't place it, and then I was flipping through those bins, and sure enough, there it was.
That's great.
Wow.
No, I mean, what a terrible thing. I'm actually the lead singer for that group, Kevin Marcy, just moved back to California, and I'm going to be working with him this year a little bit. We're going to put a little band back together.
Oh, that's fantastic. Very cool.
Yeah. Of course, his brother's been with, Kimball Marcy's been with Brad Paisley for 15 years, maybe longer now.
Oh, yeah. That's cool. Well, anyway, tell me how you ended up becoming a stranger.
That's an interesting story. Okay, well, I was living in Nashville, and I was kind of frustrated. I was married, and I moved out there first, and then I was kind of waiting to bring my wife out when things got settled for me work-wise, and I just, I ended up playing in town some and living with friends and stuff like that, and it just got to be it was so hard to get an in out there, just, playing with anybody. Now, my first gig was with Mindy McCready, and I ended up getting fired from that because the guy, I was filling in for a guy that was, he was going out to play with Reba. His name was Jimmy Nichols. And me and Jimmy became good friends. And the same night I was filling in for Mindy, her and Jimmy Nichols got in some kind of a big argument, and they had a falling out. And her manager came to me and said, "Well, we can't use you anymore because we don't want, for the thing with the argument thing to follow, to roll over onto this thing." So it became, it was just it was bad timing.
I guess, yeah.
Or whatever, things happen for a reason. I guess it wasn't meant to be. I had a good time, but I was scared to death up there with her. Let's see, what else was it? Okay, let's see, and then I got off on the Mindy thing. So I ended up doing, a little sound work and just whatever I needed to do to get by out there. And my wife moved out, and we ended up moving like 40 miles away from town. So it just I got farther and farther away from music. Mm-hmm. And I actually got a chance to go out and do sound with Merle when I was living out there, because some friends of mine were working with him at the time from Redding, California, which is where I'm from originally. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up going out and doing sound with Merle, and he liked me as a sound man. And I did that for about a year and a half. And one day I was playing piano in the studio, and Merle walked in and heard me. I didn't know he was in there, and it kind of went from there. He walked in and goes, "How would you like to play piano for me?" And I was like, it freaked me out because I had kind of given up the whole notion of playing music for a living. Anyway, even though I was traveling with Merle Haggard, I was kind of like, okay, I'm a sound engineer now. I'm not a musician. So, mm-hmm. And he walked in and said that, and then just, the whole thing kind of clicked again, and I started practicing my butt off and getting, getting better, and he kept letting me try things. And my first gig with the band was I think it was 2000. Something like that. Yep. With Jewel at the CMA Awards, and I was scared to death again on stage. So.
Wow.
And then he wouldn't he never let me out of it. He made me keep doing it even though I was nervous. And kind of sometimes I would rather have not been up there. I felt that way when I was playing, but I was still doing. He thought I was doing a good enough job to keep me up there, so I stayed.
That's awesome. The first time I met you was in 2000. It was in a place called Vandalia. It was down in the lower part of Michigan on the Indiana border, and you were doing sound. And then the next show was in Indianapolis, and you were playing keyboard. And I'm like, what happened, man?
Man, that's a weird thing, because Indianapolis was where I played with Mindy McCready that when I went back there.
Oh, is that right? No kidding.
Yeah, that was the one show I did with Mindy. Yeah.
Wow, I'll be darned. But I remember that. That was really cool, because Merle didn't have a piano player for some years after Mark Erie left either. So.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I understand that. I didn't really. It's funny because I didn't know Mark, until I started playing the piano for Merle. But I'm a big Mark fan. I was listening to all Merle's old records, and I'm a huge fan still of him. He's a great guy.
Well, it shows in your playing, because you have a lot of that style, and I'm sure it's probably an on-purpose thing, when you're playing Merle Haggard stuff. But you certainly can really, you really have that style and that flair.
Well, I listened to Mark a lot. I was, he always impressed me. I loved his style.
Absolutely.
Very bluesy.
Absolutely. Well, you also did some gigs with Merle playing bass as well, and then you did some gigs where you were running his teleprompter and kind of moved around a little bit.
Yeah, that's the truth. I did. I moved around a lot. I kind of just did, whatever he needed the most at the time. It seems like, as far as from me, it just seemed natural, and I always tried to, do it with grace and I think when he started needing the teleprompter, I think maybe he was a little embarrassed about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it made him feel better to have somebody, running the thing that was, somebody that he knew was a musician also.
Right.
Noel actually did it too. So
yeah,
it was. So I didn't feel bad at all about it. I felt like I was actually, a part. And he always treated me like part of the band when I was running the teleprompter. So.
Oh yeah. Well, you also I saw you open a show one night too while you were Floyd Domino was actually playing keyboard. You came out and opened the show that night.
Yeah. I did that for about a year. He had me doing that. And speaking of feeling uncomfortable, that was another thing. It's just like, at first I told him, Merle, I don't want to go out there and do that. That's not, how the heck am I going to do that in front of you? And and he just, if he knew something made me feel uncomfortable, he almost always made me do it.
Well, you got to push the boundaries,
Yeah, well, thank God, right? I mean, it's helped me grow.
Absolutely.
As a musician and as a person. I mean, that's I think he really loved me, kind of like a son. He was that way with a lot of people, but he really, when he liked you, he'd do almost anything for you.
Yeah. In all the years that I got to see Merle, he was always so very nice to me, and everybody was. I was very happy that we had the chance to come down and see you guys last September down in Battle Creek, and my son was with me, and it was a good day. We got to visit with everybody, and we got to visit with Merle, and it was a good show. Merle was feeling good, he sounded good, and it was a good day. It was a good last memory to have for me,
Right. Yeah, I do remember that. That was great. Yeah, he was feeling good back then. He had a good run. He had that battle with cancer was about the first time was about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I guess now, and then he got past it, and he and you would have never known it for at least 5 years. He just acted like it never happened to him, and he just he kind of had that thing about him, that he just he could overcome something mentally, and then convince himself it had never happened, and that's probably why he was such a great artist.
Yeah.
Or had something to do with it,
Absolutely.
Yeah, he was he had a great run. I mean, and he did get a second chance.
Absolutely.
A lot of people don't. Yeah.
Well, the last couple solo albums that he did I thought were some of the best that he'd done in many years, and you had quite a bit to do with that. You were playing on them, and you wrote some of the music. You and Scott Joss wrote on the I Am What I Am album, Bad Actor. You guys co-wrote that with Merle. And then the Working in Tennessee album, Down on the Houseboat, which I love, and Laugh It Off.
I just found that demo the other day. I have a version of that with me singing it, and doing all the instruments on the keyboard and stuff. The demo that I did for him on Down on the Houseboat. That's fun. You should sing.
Oh, that's cool. I love that song.
Talk about jogging down memory lane. that was great. I mean, writing with Merle was something. As a kid, if he had a song idea or something that he wanted to get going, he'd call you at 3 o'clock in the morning and he'd go, "Hey, Doug, I got this idea." And I'm jumping out of bed, going, "What's wrong? Somebody's dying. The house is on fire." And it's Merle, with the, "Hey, I got a great idea for a song."
Wow. So
he knew how to make you pay attention to it. That's for sure, right?
Oh, amen to that. No doubt. What did you do a lot of recording with him out there at his studio?
Yeah, I did. Me and Scotty actually, live here in Reading, where he lived, and part of that was intentional. I moved back here when I went to work for him because I wanted to be available, if he wanted to record, and so I would play piano on a lot of things. Once we got a song ready, or he had a song he wanted to do, he'd just call, and I'd go out and play piano. Then sometimes I'd overdub bass if the whole band wasn't flying in.
Mm-hmm.
But I did hundreds of songs out there with him.
Wow.
But actually, a lot of them nobody's ever heard, which is kind of neat.
Doug, what are some of the projects that Merle did that weren't released?
Well, as far as projects. I mean, like entire projects. There's not that many entire projects, but he would just, he would record a song like every, like once a month or so. He'd have a song or two that, he'd just record. And I don't know where a lot of them were supposed to end up. A lot of them were, he would say were for things that, that they were going to be used for things that some of them happened, some of them didn't. So there's just a lot of loose material. The Roots Volume 1 project, you remember that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There was, we actually did enough material there for like a whole second album that is, it's still sitting out there.
Yeah, I always wondered about that, yeah. Well, he talked about an Ernest Tubb tribute, too. Did he ever record that?
Yeah, we did. The Ernest Tubb thing, we did, I think we did about 4 or 5 cuts. And then it kind of turned into something else. He would do that. He'd start a project, and then would start working on it, get about halfway through, and then he'd be off to something else before we finished it. So there's just all these pieces of things.
Well, I asked him.
And they're all great.
Oh, absolutely. I asked him. He was on my show last August, and I asked him. I said, Merle, why do you re-record some of your old songs? The last few albums he would do some songs that he'd recorded previously, and do new versions of them. And he said lack of material, and I thought, how could you possibly have a lack of material?
It's, what it is. Merle didn't want to mess with the song unless he loved it. He had to. Mm-hmm. It had to really excite his soul, and his musical sense and his creativity, or he didn't even want to mess with it. I mean, if he didn't like a song, he wouldn't even listen to it, and he'd actively try to stay away from music that he didn't like.
Well, certainly.
So he was always polite about it, but he was just that way. He wouldn't put his energy into a song unless he loved it, just loved it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's more what it was than he thought there was lack of songs. There was lack of songs that he loved,
Well, I know very well that Merle didn't use a set list on the road. I noticed the last few years he kind of stuck to mostly the same songs, but there again, every once in a while he'd kind of branch out and do something different.
Right.
How was it working on the road with him? I mean, I'm sure that kept you on your toes.
Oh yeah. Well, pretty much if he did a new song on stage, or if he was going to do a new song, he would let us practice it. And many times would practice a new song, and then he would never do the song, or he wouldn't do it for like 2 months, and then all of a sudden he'd do. Remember that song we practiced? So there was just a lot of music, and we pretty much. Everything new that he did, we'd either recorded or we'd played before in one of our rehearsal sessions. And, he liked to rehearse, back in the day, probably, until the last couple of years ago, he'd have us come out to the house like once or twice a week when he was out here and just like do living room practices where we'd just play everything we could think of. And, sometimes some of us would sing or whatever. He liked to sit back and play guitar too when somebody else was singing. So it's but he always made sure we knew, or we'd at least tried the songs before he did them. So you'd be amazed at how much playing went on around Merle, especially back in the day. They used to jam sessions were everywhere, and like when Freddie Powers was around, they were playing music all night long every night.
Down on the houseboat, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was definitely that way. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Well, Doug, you've written and recorded some great songs yourself, and you and Scott have a wonderful album out called A Couple of Strangers. And, folks, those are available at cdbaby.com and golosio.com. And YouTube has got a bunch of videos of you guys. You got some great songs, and I got to talk about this because you know how much I love this song, and you probably know what I'm going to say already. But it's down on the corner of misery and pain. I still love that song.
All right. Yeah, and you did a nice version of that. I agree. I mean, I think that's a cool tune too. It's almost you hear the title and it almost sounds too macabre, but I mean, it's Boy, it's about as country as you can get, isn't it?
Oh man, I still love that song. I still listen to it, and I'm like, man, I love that song. And the other one that I'd like, and I'm not sure if
It was
you
a
guys,
true story.
it's a true story. Well, that's why it's so good.
Yeah,
Then.
yeah, that had a lot to do with me and my ex-wife. So,
Mm-hmm.
and what happened afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Not that that's never happened before, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And me and the dog. That's another one I really like too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that was me and the dog was all me and Merle. That was like he wrote about half the words, I wrote about half the words, and then I came up with the melody line and did the demo in my in my loft studio I had back then, and ran it out there to him, and he really liked it. He wanted, he almost recorded that song himself a bunch of times, but it just never happened. So, I think he just couldn't wrap his. I think he couldn't wrap his own experience around it enough to record it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was definitely about me. It was one of those songs. He liked to write songs about people, and he did that. He did do that with me a lot, where he'd write things about what was going on because he knew a lot about what was going on in my life because I told him everything, and he was a very curious person. So that was one of those songs. I guess I'm fortunate that someone like that was actually did write a song about what was going on in my life at one time. So
yeah, that's pretty cool, dude. That's pretty
happened.
cool. There's a song, you sent me a demo of it a few years ago. It was called "A Little Love Never Hurts," and I think that was one that you and Merle were writing together too.
Yeah, that was another one. Yeah, let me think about that. That was "A Little Love Never Hurts." That was about the same way. It was about half and half, and it was one of those. That's back. We went through a couple of years where he'd just call me when he had a song idea, and I would drive out there to the ranch, which was probably, gosh, at the time it was about 40 minutes from my house, and sit there with him and figure out what he wanted to do with it. Then I'd drive back up the hill and start recording in the studio, in my little home studio by myself for about 3 or 4 days, and then get a demo, and then run back down to the ranch again and tell me, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? And then run back up to the place and do it, then bring it back down. And
wow,
that was one of those.
Well, there was another one
in college.
There was another one I heard online. It was called "Red-Headed Songwriter." Was that kind of about a Willie type of tune, or?
That was another one too. That's Red-Headed Songwriter was kind of Merle just had that title, and he called me, and it was one of those late night calls. He goes, "Hey, why don't you write a song called Red-Headed Songwriter?" A lot of times he'd he'd come up with an idea, and like he said, if the idea is good enough, the song writes itself, and a lot of times that's true.
Yeah.
So and that was I kind of wrote that song about. I was thinking about Willie because it was when that whole thing went down with Willie, and it seemed like everybody was getting arrested back then. I won't say it was about me because I was in jail once, but it was for like 4 hours, like Johnny Cash. I wasn't really in jail.
I remember that. I think I talked to you right about that time.
yeah. Merle actually bailed me out. That was one of those. He saved my tail that time.
Well, there's a song right there you could write. Merle Haggard bailed me out of jail.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Gosh, you're right. I keep forgetting about that.
The night Merle Haggard bailed me out.
Merle Haggard bailed me out. That's a good idea. Funny, yeah, we'll have to do that with the Strangers tribute, maybe.
Absolutely.
God will do some more writing with the Strangers tribute.
Oh, that'll be great. Well, now tell me about that. I understand that you guys are performing with Toby Keith here shortly, and then you have some dates booked out on the road too with the Strangers. Is that right?
Yeah, I just actually found out that there were dates, already booked. I mean, I heard Norm asked me about it if I was interested, and of course I said yeah, but I thought that might happen, but then it's like, when Merle died, it was such a shocker. I mean, I thought he'd dodged the bullet again, but it's like, I couldn't even think about doing that, but it makes more sense than anything else, to keep the band together, because everybody, there's a lot of singers, and there's a lot of talent in that band.
Oh yeah, you guys are so tight. Such a great sound.
Yeah, I really hope we do it. I hope it keeps going because I think it's going to be great.
Absolutely. So is everybody on board with that from the current band?
Well, I think so. It's I'm not sure what we're going to do on the with the because Norm wanted me to play bass and Taras was actually on bass, but I was the last bass player, so we'll probably and all of us work with other bands, so. Mm-hmm. What we'll probably end up doing is I would imagine sometimes we're probably going to interchange people. You know, like maybe I'll play piano one time and Floyd will play piano the next time, or I'll play bass and Taras will play bass, and maybe Jeff will come in and play drums when Jimmy can't do it, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I get the feeling we're gonna move it around a little bit, or if Noel has to sing somewhere else, then one of us will probably have to sing for the Strangers thing. I think if we just figure out how to make it happen, I think it'll work.
So are you going to get Benny doing some singing? He's a good singer.
Yeah, we're going to. I don't want to say that because I don't want him to get scared. But yeah, we all want to see Benny sing. I agree. He's great.
He is. He's a good singer, and he's a monster player.
We need to get him past that nervous part. It's like.
Well,
maybe I could tell him that I was nervous too.
You'll have to be like Merle. You'll just have to push him a little bit and push him out of his comfort zone, and he'll get it.
Yeah, he will. I mean, if he had to do it, he'd be great at it. So maybe that's his time now.
Absolutely. Well, Dougie, I can't wait I hope I get to see you guys again, because every time I get to visit with you guys, it's like old friends, and I just
for sure, Scott.
I hope we have more time to spend together, and I'm looking forward to hearing more music from you, and hopefully we'll get to see each other down the road. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and my condolences to you and all the Strangers. I know it was tough for everybody, and
yeah, thank you. Yeah,
it's
for sure. We're going to miss him. That's for sure, Scott, and I appreciate the opportunity you've given me, and thanks very much for having me on, Scott, and let's visit again when we meet up.
I hope so. It's been a pleasure, my friend. Well, I'm going to go back. I'm going to play Down on the Houseboat, because we got talking about that, and I think that's a good one to play right now. So we're going to play that for the folks as we continue with My Kind of Country here on Fish Creek Radio. Thank you, Doug Colosio.
Thank you, Scott.